in the event of an emergency, the individual is the emergency manager.
Correct.
Because you're managing your emergency.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time.
And you don't necessarily have to manage that alone. I mean, you can have a command structure.
Correct.
Right?
Right. And we're familiar with ICS and all of that
Yeah.
formality. And we're not, and like you said, there's no certificates being passed out at your neighborhood preparedness group.
No.
However, the concepts are sound.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Perez.
And I'm Wesley Long.
And we're bringing you a fresh new take on disaster preparedness.
Welcome to Disaster Class.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Disaster Class. I am Wesley Long. That's it. Class is now in session. So we got a really fun episode for you guys this week as well. We've still got Graeme here in the shop. And just to recap, Paramedic, 13 years, Supervisor, 4 years, Educator, 11 years, Father, 5 years, Prepper, 6 years. Last time we spoke, we were talking about your Tesla solar home system, and this time we're going to change gears in our conversation a little bit and talk about something that's super fun that we thought you guys would enjoy hearing about. Then this is your neighborhood preparedness group. So let me start with this question. How did your neighborhood preparedness group start? What are the origins? Take us from the beginning.
Well, it really just kind of started as a friendly neighbor relationship.
Okay.
Getting to know your neighbor. I think I've said before, starts with a wave.
That's it.
You just wave at your neighbor, be friendly, get to know them, and at very least, if that's all you do, then that's in a way being prepared, because, being nice to your neighbor, that's a pretty core value.
Very much so.
So it really just started with that, and then conversations turned into, possibilities of what ifs. And I don't necessarily mean, like I said in the last episode,
Right.
That we're not preparing for the end of times. We're not preparing for the marauders, as it
Right.
were. It's really just a matter of, even if it comes down to, if my kid needs help getting off the bus, if I get tied up at work.
Right. Are you available?
Right. If I'm at work and my wife is home alone with the kids and she needs to get shoveled out from a snowstorm, that kind of a thing. Or if I have power from my power bank and my neighbor needs to charge his cell phone, we've already had that conversation. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we're already, not only are we familiar with one another, but we know that we can rely on one another.
Right.
Which
Really
is,
cool.
Yeah, which is just a huge part of it.
And again, we talked about communication, right? It's just getting communication started.
Yeah.
Having these conversations.
Yeah.
Building the familiarity with people that are in your area and that will be hit by likely the same issues that you're hit with because they live right next to you.
Yeah, or something very similar.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it makes sense from a lot of different areas. Really cool. Okay, so we've talked about it. How does it work?
It's really casual.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have monthly meetings. We don't have bylaws. It's nothing like that. We didn't vote a preparedness group chair.
Right.
It's really just casual, and it's just a group of friends that happen to be neighbors.
So you say casual. What does it mean? You hang out at somebody's house every so often? What do you?
Yeah. So we try to do it at least quarterly,
Mm-hmm.
where we have what we've coined the preparedness day,
Mm-hmm.
as it were, and we just pick a topic that one of us is better at than the other ones.
Okay. You pick a topic. So what subjects do you consider?
So, the last couple that we've had either revolve around food preservation, which there's always someone that's better at canning than you are.
Right.
And if you don't know how to can, then you can go to someone and figure out how to do it safely with someone that has done it safely. Because there are things that you can do wrong, and you can get very sick or make your family very sick if you do it incorrectly, right? And there's there's nuances to it that you can only really learn. You can watch so many YouTube videos on how to do it.
But you got to get out and do the thing.
Right, and if you have someone that's done it before, done it safely, knows how to do it, it's like see one, do one, teach one, right?
Nice.
And yeah, that's kind of our motto. And maybe not motto, maybe more of like a ethos, I guess.
Right.
But you know, I happen to know first aid because of what I do, and it's not necessarily something that the layperson knows how to do. And you know, you're not getting a certificate at the end of this, but you leave with the knowledge. And another one that we had was fire building, where we all kind of had a friendly competition to see who can start a fire from nothing. Right. So I mean, we all tried different methods, of course. I'm not going to say who won, but it definitely was me. And so,
good.
but
we have that recorded.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome.
It was me.
Awesome. Right. Nice. Very nice. Well done.
Yeah, and things that you want to be figuring out when you need to figure them out, right? Like whether it be preserving food because the power is out, right? So you don't want to have to figure out how to can green beans when the only option is to do it on a propane fire. Right, or if that's your only option, and if you don't do it, you're going to be hungry tomorrow.
Right.
You don't want to have to be learning how to start a fire when it's cold and wet out.
Right.
And
you're already losing feeling.
Right, because you're cold and wet. Right. If it's cold and wet out, so are you, and I'd rather have a fire going so that I'm not those things. And more importantly, like I stressed in my last episode, it's not about me.
Right.
Right. I don't know if you've ever dealt with a cold and wet toddler, but
guessing not great.
Yeah, or
if you can avoid that, you want to actively avoid that.
Yeah,
situation.
or a cold and wet wife,
right.
Which in some cases is a similar experience. Yeah.
I'm not touching that one.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. So it's really just a matter of knowing that we can do it, and also knowing that if I can't do it, you can do it, right? So I don't necessarily have to rely on my own personal skills. They're very good, right? If you're out in the wilderness and you need to know these things, then more power to you. And great, like you survived the wilderness. But we don't live in the wilderness,
right?
Which is why we have this group.
Correct.
And
you're not in a silo.
You're
not on your own.
You're not isolated.
You're part of a community, and we talk about that often. Continue to think about yourselves as part of a community, so that you can be a custodian of that community and someone that also then helps.
And assists in the emergency. Correct. Because I like to think that in the event of an emergency, the individual is the emergency manager.
Correct.
Because you're managing your emergency.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time.
And you don't necessarily have to manage that alone. I mean, you can have a command structure.
Correct.
Right?
Right. And we're familiar with ICS and all of that formality. And we're not, and like you said, there's no certificates being passed out at your neighborhood preparedness group.
No.
However, the concepts are sound.
Yeah.
And if you can share some of those concepts with people, because we talk about capable citizens all the time and instinct ready, and that's what we're trying to build.
Yeah.
So you can be a component, you can be an asset in your community if you're a capable citizen. So the same thing with you. You're just extending citizen capabilities amongst your neighborhood, which I don't think it's not on here as a question, but we will get to it. I'll start throwing it out there now so it's in your brain. But we talked about what is the obligation to help somebody.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. Yeah. But this is a one way to start having that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that concept. But so you talked a little bit about what subjects you consider. How often do you meet? I think you mentioned that. You shoot for quarterly.
Quarterly.
Okay.
Yeah, thereabouts. I mean, and it's like
nothing formal, right?
And even if it's really just about information sharing, right? Yeah. So if you and whether that be a physical skill or just the information itself.
Right, you mentioned once before, I think, and I don't know if it was you specifically, but the kinds of information sharing that we're talking about, right? You might be thinking, well, what information? Hey, the Home Depot has generators on sale this week.
Yeah.
Everybody in the community go grab one. Inherently in that text, you're going to get someone that says, well, I don't know how to set up a generator. Not a problem.
Yeah.
That's why we have a group.
Yeah, exactly.
We will assist you because it behooves us to make sure you have power when something happens, because the community as a whole is stronger.
Right, and I mean, even to that point, if one of us has a bit of information that the other ones don't, then to have that communication out in the community is helpful, right? Because then we can start
especially
ahead of it
beforehand. That's my thing. Beforehand, right?
Yeah.
It might be that
Preventative maintenance.
Everybody go to Graeme's house because he knows how to do X, and we're going to need it. That's an option, but how much better would it be if you teach X to everyone, so when it happens, they can manage it themselves?
Yeah, and it's just like I said, it's just about information sharing, and that's one of the most important things.
I love it. So, what benefits have you noticed? Right, you have this thing. You're part of this group. Is there anything tangible like, well, this thing happened as a result of us building that familiarity, right? Us having that community conversation. Really, that's what it is. It's an ongoing community conversation.
Sure.
Really.
Well, I mean, just to know your neighbor alone, right? To know the person that you're living next to is invaluable.
Yep.
And to be able to rely on them is that much more invaluable.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that for the sake of standing shoulder to shoulder,
right,
in some sort of marauding exercise.
Right.
It's more for the sake of being able to rely on them if my power is off and yours isn't. If
you already have the rapport with them.
Yeah.
And already had the practiced conversations of, hey, I'm coming over because I don't have power, but hey, I can bring some of my canned goods because that might supplement your supply. So I'm also not coming over and just leeching off of you. It's more of a, hey, we're in this together.
It's reciprocal, for sure.
Yeah.
A symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that gets into your point about
it's a big question.
What's the...
It's a big question.
Yeah.
I don't have... Like, we've talked about this before on the channel. We would love to hear your thoughts. What is the moral obligation to help, quote unquote, your neighbor?
Yeah.
Because with that, right, the type of personality that I have, and we share a similar personality, we share the INTJ. So a lot of it's logistics based, and it's not going to be based on emotion, right? So I get it cognitively. We need to help people. Totally understand that. I understand that.
Yeah.
But the next question that I have is to what end and how far? How much do I have to help? Do I help to the point where it's hurting me and my family? Right? At what point in time do I say, no, I can't give anymore? And again, these are open-ended. We're not going to be answering those questions here because these are massively huge questions. But it's things to be thinking about as you start building up your own family preparedness. And this has happened to me constantly. It happens all the time when I used to go out and do the community emergency planning class by myself as Go Bag Wesley. Literally, I would always hear two comments at the end. I'd get together with a group of like 15 to 20 people, and I would show them my bag. I had a little document of all the things that I had in my bag, the decisions why I got this item and not that item, and the things that I've tinkered with. And if I could just knowledge share that with people, I think that there's value in that, right? Two things I heard at the end of every single time I went. The first question was, can I just buy your bag, Wesley? Like people, because to have someone go through that they recognize as someone that spent time and energy, thought process, they're like, okay, you know what you're talking about. I just want your bag. And I'm like, well, my bag's very personal. I've got a lot of money invested in this. It's going to cost you probably $1,500, and you don't really want to buy my bag. You just want some answers, right? The next thing that people always said, and it bugged me to no end, was, well, in an emergency, I'm just going to find you. I'm like, nope, you've missed the point of this conversation. I am helping you to help yourself. Because A, I won't necessarily be accessible to you. That can't be your plan to come find Wesley. Like that's not a viable plan for everyone on the planet. Like Wesley doesn't have resources for that. And Wesley's bag, as a single individual who doesn't have toddlers, a wet one or a dry one, or a wife, a wet one or a dry one, I'm taking care of me. The stuff in my bag is for me, one person. So no, I'm not built to sustain a community by myself.
Right. Well, and to that point, that's why you have the conversation with your neighbors, is because as soon as an emergency happens, let's say a hurricane hits and the power goes out and the trees are down everywhere, a microburst, as it were, that happened a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Catastrophic, right? To whole communities, to states.
Correct.
If you don't know your neighbor, then what you might as well ask yourself, what is the ethical obligation that you have to provide assistance to a stranger? Right? The answer is none.
Because you have to take care of your family.
Right.
And you spent time, money, and energy preparing for your family, your wife and kids.
Yeah, right? the opportunity for any ethical obligation is gone as soon as the emergency happens.
Right.
And like we've said, every individual is responsible for being their own emergency manager.
Correct.
I'm not responsible for being your emergency manager.
Correct. You're not.
I will not, because I have my own emergencies to manage.
Correct.
And there is a point that I will assist people that aren't strangers, right? Because that's
Correct.
why we have the
Give them more
communication.
leeway. If you're not a stranger, I treat you differently.
Right.
Because now you're in the friend or family category. You're not a stranger.
Right. And there's some equity added there.
Correct.
So
Correct.
it's reciprocal. But if you don't know your neighbor, if you don't spend the time to get to know your neighbor, if you don't take the time to at least wave at them and be friendly with them, then
When the
they
time of
might as
emergency
well
hits, they're a stranger.
they might as well be a stranger. They are a stranger.
They are a stranger. Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. So, you talked about the benefits, minimizing the amount of strangers on your block, right? That's really cool. You've got friends; they're friendlies now, right? Like that's really awesome to know as you drive down your block. Those are assets. Those are people in your corner, and as much as they're your corner, you would be in their corner. Right?
Yeah.
That's just the reciprocal symbiotic relationship is really cool. So what would you recommend to someone who wanted to start a similar group? Someone's listening and like, man, that's really cool. Yeah, I don't wave at my neighbors. They're all strangers.
Wave at your neighbor. Wave at your neighbor.
Right.
Just be friendly. Smile at your neighbor.
Right.
Right? Get to know them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying like get to intimately know them. Like you don't need to know every single one of their birthdays.
Right.
Right? Because I don't.
Right.
I mean, I don't even know the majority of people's birthdays.
Right.
But that I think that just might be my role as a human being.
Right.
But,
That's a conversation.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And it's just be friendly and be willing to start the conversation.
Right.
Because if you're not willing to start the conversation, they're probably not going to be willing to start
Right.
the conversation. And until you do that, they might as well just remain a stranger.
Right. And that's the thing. Man, and then once you break down that wall, they might be just as eager to talk to you. They might have some skill sets that you can learn from, vice versa.
Well, and people
Yeah.
people are genuinely interesting.
Right.
Right?
All of us, to some degree.
Even the people that aren't that interesting have something interesting about them. And
Agreed.
like you might find that interesting. And you don't necessarily have to find everyone interesting.
Right. And you don't necessarily have to love everybody.
Right.
But
you should get along with your neighbor.
right. And it's going to behoove everybody to do that
Yeah.
and benefit everybody in an emergency if you have a friendly rapport with them.
Yeah, because now people aren't going to be coming to you expecting you to solve their emergency.
Correct. I love that. All right, so have you had any situations requiring your neighbors to come together? Like, so you've got this thing, you've been kind of practiced at it. Did you get an opportunity to give it a shot?
No.
Good.
And I say that very confidently, and I'm happy that we haven't had
Awesome.
an opportunity because we haven't experienced anything we come together, right? And knowing that we would come together in the event of an emergency is enough.
Right. And I also would wager things that might have been really small on the scale that could have, or things that are on the scale that could have been emergencies or would cause someone to knock on your door. A lot of that stuff is mitigated because you have this group and you've already shared that knowledge. And even just knowing that you could freely go across the street and knock on their door if things got worse, that helps manage.
And safely go to their door and knock on their door.
Because you don't know what you're getting when you knock on some people's doors these days.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is you've prepped again ahead and you've mitigated stuff that you don't even have to worry about because of the situation that you're in.
Yeah, and you don't realize how much you have been stressing.
Right.
Until you realize that you don't have to stress it.
You don't have to stress about that anymore.
Yeah.
So cool. Awesome, Graeme. Well, we appreciate you talking about these topics. You guys are going to see Graeme a little bit more. He's probably going to fill in a little bit and do some podcasting with us. We're really excited to add him to the team. It's another opportunity to learn from someone else, right? I just find the Giants and I stand on their shoulders. That's all I do. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. You know? So, yeah, we truly appreciate that, and we'll leave some notes in there of how individuals can get a hold of Graeme, just to get more information from him, because he's just, as you guys see, he's a font of information, and we appreciate your time and everything. But before we conclude, there is always homework. This week is no different. We ask that you subscribe to Disaster Class, leave us a 5-star rating, give us a thumbs up and comment about something that you learned or appreciated from the show, from Graeme, this Neighborhood Preparedness group. Really, really cool, something that you guys could start doing, and it just starts with a wave, So hopefully you guys can start replicating that in your areas. But if you have a question, a preparedness tip, or a disaster story to share, send us an email at disasterclass@instinctready.com. Drop us a message on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, and when you do that, we'll put you in the running to be featured on the show and win some really cool prizes. But once again, we just want to say thank you so much for listening to Disaster Class. Stay educated, stay prepared, stay equipped. Class is dismissed. We'll see you guys. Thank you.